So welcome everyone to this EU Clusters talk on how we get to net zero in carbon emissions with the Net Zero Industry Act, how to boost clean tech with clusters. And we're thinking about, of course, 2050. We're trying to get to net zero carbon emissions by 2050. How do we get there? This is where we're going to roll up our sleeves during this talk about how we can get to strategic net zero technologies, manufacturing capacity to at least 40% of annual deployment needs by 2030. So that's even sooner. And which tech? Where we're talking about solar energy, fuel cells, wind power, biogas, hydrogen, batteries, carbon capture, heat pumps, geothermal, grid technologies. All those things are good. That's all what we have to develop between now and 2050 and try to get to that 40% of annual deployment needs by 2030. So these clusters talks are organized by the European Cluster Collaboration Platform, ECCP, 1,500 organizations on behalf of DG GROW at the European Commission. I'm Chris Burns, and our agenda today. We'll hear a little bit about cluster news, the latest news headlines from the ECCP, then information talk from the European Commission. We will tap your brains with the Slido cues, questions, and then the panel discussion. And we want your questions into that chat that you see at the bottom. Click on the chat, in the Q&A. But look at the chat as well. The chat is very important. See that there's lots of information, lots of links and things to exchange information on. So after that panel discussion, we'll have funding opportunities. A few more tech tips, hashtag EU Clusters Talks if you hear anything great to cast wider. Let's see, this will be recorded for playback. The slides are also available, so you can look at those nice and calmly later on at your leisure. And if you want to talk directly to us and raise a question directly online on camera, then you click that raise your hand at the very bottom. You can see that at the bottom of your screen. So you got three things to watch. You got that chat. You want to put your questions in Q&A, and then click on that raise your hand if you want to talk to us directly. I think that does it. Nina Hubman, ECCP team member, with some news from the European Cluster Collaboration Platform. Nina, please.
Many thanks, Chris. And welcome to this EU Clusters talk. Looking forward to being here with you this morning and to listen in to what is going on regarding clean tech. But before we do, we have some news to share from the ECCP. So first of all, we would, of course, to register for the event in May. I will put also all the links in the chat so that you can follow the link and it will take place in Brussels, digital transition, building resilience, as well as deep dive into the key drivers like skills, funding, and technology. So the place to be for the clusters in May in Brussels. And it takes place, as I said, on the 7th and on the 8th. And on the 8th, we will also have the matchmaking event at the cluster conference. So physically during 4 hours directly at the conference venue, you also have the chance to register for the matchmaking event when you register for the conference.
I hope to see many of you there at the conference, Nina. I plan on being there.
Yeah, I believe many clusters will be there. And we also hope to see you in Milan in Italy, which is a bit closer already on the 26th and 27th of March. It's our Clusters Meet Regions event, which will be organized in partnership with AFIL, the Lombardy Intelligent Factory Association, and the Lombardy Regional Authority, to discuss the policy effectiveness of central level strategies and the implementation on local level, have best practices and models by Italian and European regions, how clusters are developing industrial strategies, and to provide, of course, an opportunity to network and to exchange on projects. The same type of event, the Clusters Meet Regions, will also take place in Graz in Austria. And for this, you can already save the date. More info will follow shortly. But for now, please put in your calendars the 18th and 19th of June. Excellent. And last but not least, make sure to check out the ECCP Trend Universe, which is a strategic foresight instrument available on the ECCP website that allows you to give a deeper understanding of future trends. I believe clean tech is a very good example also of this, and how it can impact your cluster organization. You can scan the QR code, go into the link I showed in the chat. And because we have a free trial for all ECCP users still during March. So even if you're maybe not a pro user for whom this is usually open, you can access it and check out all the features that the Trend Universe offers. And with that, I close and I hand back to you so that we can get started on the topic of the day.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Nina. Let's go straight to talk about the Net Zero Industry Act. What's this all about? Let's find this out from Daniel Geldahl, who is Policy Officer at DG GROW, European Commission. Daniel, please.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Pleasure to be with you this morning. Hi, Chris. Hi, Nina.
Morning.
Nice to see you again. Chris, you mentioned it, pulling up our sleeves. This is what it's all about with the Net Zero Industry Act. This is how the EU pulls up its sleeves. And of course, this is a piece of legislation. And the most important, in fact, is that we all pull up our sleeves, and that includes the clusters and the companies on the ground, because that's what really matters at the end of the day.
Indeed.
What we produce here in Brussels has to connect with the people on the ground. And that's a bit how I will structure my presentation. First slide, Nina, please. So the Net Zero Industry Act as a proposal was presented last year in March. It was prepared in a record speed of 6 weeks, whereas usually it takes 1.5 years to prepare a legislative proposal. And the reason is that it was a top political priority due to the increased competition, in particular from China, in the clean tech area. As you know, a lot of clean tech is produced in China en masse, is very price competitive, often half the price of European products. And at the same time in the USA, we had the US Inflation Reduction Act, which creates a very beneficial environment for companies in clean tech. So the EU had to react fast, and that's what we did. The general objective is to create a regulatory framework to secure a sustainable supply of net zero technologies. And here it's also about strategic autonomy, reducing strategic dependencies, in particular from China. And in the lower right, this is the graph that you probably saw already last year. The dark blue is what we produce in the EU, and that's all the different technologies, and the red is what is produced in China. So to sum that up in a couple of words is we are very obviously very dependent on Chinese technologies in this area. And the reason that is problematic is because such dependencies can lead to supply disruptions. We saw that with the conflict in Ukraine, where we had to abruptly stop the import of gas. And so this is the new EU strategy, part of the Green Deal, the so-called Green Deal Industrial Plan, to diversify away from single sources and ramp up production in Europe. On the lower left, we see wind, solar, heat pumps, and electrolysers. The red bar is what we currently produce. and the gray striped bar is what we have to deploy every year. And so what we want to do is really ramp up our own production to at least 40%, as Chris mentioned. Next slide, please. In the Net Zero Industry Act, the last political trilogue took place on the 6th of February, meaning that the act will soon enter into force. And as part of this final political agreement, 2 political benchmarks were agreed. We already mentioned the 40%, but there's also one where it will be the aim in the EU to reach 15% of world production by 2040 across these clean energy technologies. Next slide, please. The main aim of the Net Zero Industry Act is really to stimulate investments, to attract investments into net zero technologies. And for that, there is 6 main pillars, and I will briefly go into detail on some of them, but that's the permitting, it's the strategic project status and investments, it's access to markets, it's about skills, it's about regulatory sandboxes. Next slide, please. In my view, clusters play an extremely important role. Why? Because you, of course, administer these communities, and so it will be important also for us to stay in touch. I am the team leader in the Commission in DG Grow that is responsible for this act, and I would be very happy to stay in touch with many of you on, as you can see, many of these pillars of the act are very relevant to clusters. Next slide, please. First on the scope. So what type of projects are covered? There is one list of net zero technologies. And by the way, the Act has been drafted in a way that it's easy to read also for businesses. That was one of the political instructions we got, was to be very clear in the drafting of this Act. And when you read it, you will see immediately what technologies are covered. The focus is, of course, on factories, so on manufacturing facilities across the full supply chain. What does that mean? So it's not just a factory that produces a solar PV panel, but also a factory that produces the solar PV components that then the last factory will need to produce the final product. So all those factories or facilities across the supply chain fall under the scope of the Act. There is an annex in the Act where the components are listed. So if you're a factory that produces such a component, you fall automatically into the scope of the Act. However, there is certain components where it's not always clear whether they are linked to clean tech. For instance, inverters. And there it's a bit on a case-by-case basis that national authorities would determine whether you're in the Act, notably on whether you are primarily producing for net zero technology off-takers. What is also in the scope with the final agreement is a new category, namely the energy-intensive industry decarbonisation projects. This means that big steel factories or chemical factories can be in scope as well, even if they do not produce primarily for net zero off-taker, as long as their products are a priori part of the net zero supply chain and they have a decarbonization element to their project. Next slide, please. Permitting is one of the key chapters of this Act. As you know, this is the first time we create a regulatory framework to speed up permitting across all member states. It covers the whole permit granting process. One of the key elements is the one-stop shop or the single point of contact. Member states have to establish at least one in every member state, and it has to be done within 6 months of entry into force of the Act. This one-stop shop is not just about permitting, it also has to present on a website all the information that is relevant to attract investments. And this is, of course, very important because, as you know, these big clean tech projects always look for 3 or 4 locations. Maybe 2 of them are in Europe and 2 elsewhere. And then if you are really have a good business card to showcase, then you're in a much better situation to attract such investments. The regulation also makes it mandatory for authorities to accept documents electronically, as well as pre-existing studies and permits, and very importantly are legally binding time limits for the whole process. And for instance, for strategic projects, the process should not take longer than 9 to 12 months. And that's very important because it's legally binding.
Yeah, that all speaks to the need for speed, speeding things up, accelerating, all those points. That's great.
Exactly. And also member states cannot say that they don't have sufficient people to do this, because in this regulation, one of the obligations on member states is to have sufficient staff and expertise for the whole process. A last point on permitting is that these environmental impact assessments are also streamlined. There is an obligation for scoping studies, which means authorities and projects agree beforehand on what is really required as part of these assessments. And that kind of avoids these long back and forths later on. There's also an obligation on bundling all these assessments. So there's lots of nice things to really speed up the process.
Right.
Then there's the net zero acceleration valleys. This is a new concept. Member states can designate geographic areas to foster clusters like yourselves, and to further streamline administrative procedures. These areas will be in the public interest. This can speed up certain processes at national level. They have to have a mandatory geographic assessment that speeds up permitting as well. They need an own one-stop shop. And these areas have to come with a plan that sets out concrete measures to further increase attractiveness via investments, skills. And the last point is that these areas would benefit from maximum co-financing rates under several regional EU funding instruments. Next slide, please. I'm aware I have only 2 minutes left, so
yeah,
I will...
if you could say the time, that would be great, Daniel. Thanks. Yeah.
I will speed up a bit.
Okay.
There's the possibility to become strategic projects, and strategic projects will be looked at in the Net Zero Europe platform, which is a high-level forum that will be created here in Brussels in June, but with lots of technical subgroups. Next slide, please. The access to markets chapter is a very important one. I will not read out all the bullet points. Why is it so important? Is because we introduce with this act new criteria in public procurement and in auctions, non-price criteria, meaning that authorities will not always go for the cheapest product, but now also have to consider sustainability and a new so-called resilience criteria. And this is really there to also incentivize products that are environmentally sustainable, but also help in auctions and public procurement when you have a European bid that is slightly more expensive. It can be scored higher if other bids are more than 50% dependent on a single source, for example, China.
Yeah, that can be a game changer there. That's very interesting. Yeah,
we think so, absolutely. Next slide, please. And this is my last or second last slide. 2 other key pillars of the Act are about innovation and skills. The regulatory sandbox is a new concept that can allow projects to ask from authorities to create such a time-limited space for them where they can enter into operation without having to respect maybe 1 or 2 rules that they have difficulties to get, for instance, permits for. So it's a way to really help startups get off the ground. And then we have the industry academies. These will be launched periodically. It's there to develop and promote the use of learning programs and to be used on a voluntary basis in member states' education and training facilities. And now we come to the last slide. This is the implementation timeline. So the Act will enter into force in June. Very important, it's a regulation, not a directive. So member states will not need to transpose it, but it's applicable as of the moment of entry into force.
Immediate. Yeah, that's good.
Immediate, and I would like to remind everybody about the primacy of EU law. It means EU law is always above national law. So companies, they should really look at this act when they talk to authorities, because for permitting, it will be the 9 months or 12 months that are in this act that count and nothing else. So we're really creating a harmonized regulatory framework for clean tech to compete in Europe. I think I will close here, but please feel free to share the slides with everybody.
Okay, that's great, Daniel. Quick question: what from Patricia Rupert? What is the volume of the grants offered? Is that possible to say?
In the valleys?
Just in the volume of the grants offered. She just wrote that. I guess it. Can you? Is that possible to answer, or is that too broad a question?
It's not possible to answer like that, but we have created another instrument called the STEP, which is in itself a one-stop shop or funding highway, which bundles all EU funding instruments that are relevant for clean tech. It's called STEP. And we will be promoting this on our website as well, the Net Zero Industry Act website. And I would strongly encourage and kindly encourage you to check it out as well.
Okay, and then very quickly also from Ariane de Kramer, is this permission for regulatory sandbox regulated? How has the EU an impact on member states to give permissions for these regulatory sandboxes?
So the EU or the Commission has a few weeks ago presented guidance for member states on how to make this work in practice. And that's actually an important element to look at, also to better understand what can be done. But what I would also like to mention is that with this act, with this regulation, we make it an obligation on member states to create these sandboxes when a company requests for it. So if in your cluster you have a company that says, this sandbox would be really important for us to get our innovative product or facility off the ground, and they go to the authorities have to make it happen.
Okay. Yeah, the clarification from Patricia, what is the volume of grants for the valleys?
So with the maximum co-financing rate means 100%, and it depends on the different financial instruments at play. So that's something that is a bit more complicated to explain, but happy to go deeper into that at a future session, because financing is key, of course.
Yeah, that could be a whole session. You're right. Okay, keep your questions coming in. That's great. Try to put them in the Q&A. So that the chat, we can just be chatting, and then the Q&A has the questions. If you can do that, that would be great. Let's go quickly now to we want to tap your brains with Slido. Let's go to Slido. And there you got on the screen there, you can use the QR code, or you go to slido.com and you tap in #cleantech. So hopefully you can do that rather quickly. And we go to the first question. How much is clean tech part of your industrial landscape? Let's take a look at that. And the speakers on the panel, keep an eye on that, because I'd be interested to get your feedback as well. There's a moderate amount we see here. Seems to be leading. Clean tech is a moderate part of people's industrial landscape. Okay, so it's there. Clean tech is part of the landscape, yeah, among most of us. Okay, very good. Let's go to the next question then. What kinds of clean tech are present in your region? What kinds of clean tech? So this is a word cloud. You can tap in. You know, I ticked off all those different kinds of clean tech that we were talking about. You might want to put in, okay, wind. Yeah. BIPV. All right. I'm not familiar with that. Daniel, do you know?
Yeah, that's a very important one. That's building integrated solar PV. So that's when you have, that's when your walls or your roof is made of panels, and that's the future. And that's very innovative. That's an area where we could really excel in Europe.
Fantastic. Great. I want that for my house. Hydrogen, solar, renewable fuels. That's quite a wide range there. A lot having to do with energy. That's very interesting. We'll also be talking about insulation. Great. Geothermal, biomass, renewable fuels. Great. Okay, a wide range, but we're focusing on wind, hydrogen, solar. That's interesting. Okay, which that will be part of the panel discussion. There are more coming in here. Yeah, BIPV. What is it? 40% of the energy is from buildings, the energy use. So that's extremely important to deal with that. Okay, let's talk the barriers. If you can do a word cloud on the barriers to clean tech, what do you see there? Because we want to bust through those barriers. We want to accelerate, as Daniel was saying, burn the red tape, one-stop shop, and that the Commission is offering the expertise as well for you to figure that out. All right. So there we have cost is a barrier, market demand, permits. Okay, so we hope to fix that with the speeding up of permits, regulatory barriers, high energy price, high electricity prices, deep tech requires time, yes. Okay, red tape, paperwork, insufficient grants and permits. Well, hopefully the net zero effort can provide relief when that comes to that. Clean energy funding, a lot of interesting awareness. Yeah, well, and this session is part of that too, is to raise the awareness about what avenues there are to get through past those barriers. So yeah, any surprises there, Daniel?
So far not, and I'm happy to see that we address all of these in one way or another in the Act. Of course, the electricity prices, that's a tough one.
Yeah, that's
one that we need to look at possibly as part of the next Commission or the next EU political cycle, starting very soon, actually. We will have European Parliament elections this year. We will have a new European Commission at the end of the year. And just to tell you that clean tech and this kind of Green Deal industrial policy will very certainly be at the top of the next political agenda as well.
Right. Okay, that's great. A lot of good input. Thanks to everybody for that. And yes, keep your questions in. I see questions coming into Q&A. That's great. Let us move on to the panel. And I'd like to do a lightning round, first of all, with who does what. Janusz Kal, the Managing Director of South Poland Clean Tech Cluster. Janusz, you're involved, you do matchmaking. I see your focus is on building renovation. Tell us a little bit more about what you do.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Janusz Kal. I'm the CEO in South Poland Clean Tech Cluster, placed in Kraków in southern Poland. We are a bottom-up organization, quadruple helix. It means that we have 4 kinds of owners. I say owners, stakeholders, because we are run as a limited liability company, non-profit, which is very unusual for clusters, which usually are public institutions. Yeah, we have among these 26 owner stakeholders, we have 6 biggest universities in southern Poland. We have big companies, micro, small, and medium-sized companies. We have communities, municipalities, and NGOs. And basically what we are doing in our cluster is promoting clean technologies, raising awareness around clean tech technologies. Clean tech is a very, very big area. All the clean tech technologies are utilized, used in all industries all over the world. So it is a very huge area. So basically, yeah, we are helping promoting clean tech and helping our member companies, institutions in becoming in the green and digital transition, becoming more resilient in their future operations.
Okay, very good. Let me move on then to Laima Balciunie, head of Clean Tech Cluster Lithuania. You're the CEO of Sunrise Tech Park, right?
Yes, exactly. And I'm afraid to sound quite repetitive because our cluster is very similar to Janusz, and our activities are quite close to it as well. So very general about the cluster. So we have 45 organizations. Among them, we have universities, we have NGOs, science and research institutions, small and medium enterprises, and of course, our main focus is on startups. So we believe that the main benefit from the cluster is to startups, because what we provide is collaboration, networking, providing information, raising awareness, consulting on innovation, access to finance, and so on. So that's
very good. All right, Massimo, can you put your camera on? I think in the meantime, let's go to Katarzyna. Oh, Massimo, there you are. Sorry. Okay, I'll stay in the order then. Massimo Davia, senior policies and funding expert, Environment Park, Polo di Innovazione, clever, interesting. Tell us about it. You need to turn your camera on. Mute. You're mute. You got to unmute it. Still don't hear you. Still don't hear you, Massimo. Okay, maybe we go. Yes, okay. That sounds good.
I don't know what happened. Thank you very much. So I'm Massimo Davia. I work for Environment Park. It's a science technology park for environmental technology based in Torino, northwestern Italy. As Environment Park, we are the coordinators of the local regional cluster. The name is Clever. That is entirely devoted to clean technologies. Clean technology, the two focuses of the cluster are today sustainable mobility, of course, because Torino has a strong tradition, industrial tradition, and present competences and skills on mobility and automotive and aerospace. And the second one is hydrogen. Hydrogen is an horizontal topic that is covering today not only mobility, but also the chemical sectors and other, let's say, hydrogen as a feedstock in an horizontal way, covering all the industry. So far the cluster accounts 120 companies from large to SMEs, and our mission is to support them, knowing that in our region there are already some very strong and high-level industrial competences. Our mission is not to support the creation of new companies, rather than to support the conversion or reconversion of present industrial skills towards clean tech markets, hydrogen and the other sector.
Yeah, that's a really key thing. I understand you work with the petroleum sector to get them to transition to green technology. It's very interesting to ensure that there's still jobs at the other side, right?
Exactly. I am the one who market renewable fuels inside the question you put on before, because in our region there are 2 or 3 oil companies that are strongly working on how to reconvert their present fossil production into renewable fuels and other energy carriers for the markets.
Okay, very good. Let's move on to Katarzyna, Kasia, I guess I can say, Baluska-Dębska, Senior Policy Advisor, EIT Climate, KIC. Tell us about that. I know I've had experience with EIT where they bring together finance and startups and others to make it happen, right?
Absolutely. So EIT Climate Kick is actually knowledge innovation community, one of the oldest knowledge innovation communities established by the EIT. The other older ones that are actually exiting the EIT motherhood this year are digital one, for instance. And there are also some new ones that came, which is creative industries and hopefully water. So it's indeed about how do we in practice implement regulations and work with industry and with innovations and with systems change that has to happen. And why I'm working there, actually, I'm a civil servant, I'm a commission official as well, but I'm on sabbatical leave because most recently I've been working in DG Klima. And I wanted to see how do we now in practice implement the regulations, and I'm interested in that because before that I was working in DG Grow, also closely with clusters on startups and SMEs, and I'm a big fan of clusters, and it was said here before, and I don't think we're saying it because this is a nice thing to say in a clusters workshop, but clusters are actually very useful ecosystems. And, you know, when Laima said, oh, I don't want to be repeating what Janusz is doing, but actually that's the whole point, that we need these ecosystems. And in Climate Kick, we also try to work with ecosystems because, okay, we have all these startups and we have all these technologies, but in order to implement them, all other elements have to come together, and it's easier done on the regional level. But I guess we'll get to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Go forth and multiply. That's the name of the game. Let's go back now to Janusz, Karl. And Janusz, Daniel was talking about one-stop shop. It so happens that you have a slide to talk about that. For that, maybe you can talk us through it.
Yes. Yes, thank you. I guess it's another kind of one-stop shops than the one-stop shop that Daniel has mentioned.
A little different, but same idea. Right.
Yeah, our one-stop shop is based on the new directive, the building directive or EPBDG directive. And we are involved, and recently last year we started the project. It's an Interreg Baltic Sea region project, which is called RenoWave. And this project is run in cooperation with the Association of the Municipalities and Powiats in Malopolska in southern region. And we are the first one-stop shop project in Poland. I know there has been a lot of one-stop shop projects in Europe, in different countries, but in Poland it is the first one. And this one-stop project is called KRK Hub Renovacji, which means renovation hub, and it stands for renovation of residential buildings. And yeah, we are creating right now our webpage and cooperation group, and that is not very easy because it's very difficult to convince owners of buildings to start the renovation of the buildings because it's expensive, they don't know how to do it, and they don't have the knowledge.
Complicated.
That's why they need help from one-stop shops like ours.
Okay. Very good. Then let us move on then to Laima. And Laima, let's see, how is your cluster supporting the uptake of clean technologies? Can you talk about a project that you work on in particular, Laima?
Thank you. Mainly just like I said previously, we facilitate collaboration between our members. Of course, we provide innovation support services for companies working in clean tech sector, the ones that develop clean tech products, prototypes, that are planning or organizing some pilot projects. Of course, we organize various events, matchmakings, and so on and so forth. And speaking about some concrete initiatives, one of our main purposes is to nurture the whole ecosystem of clean tech in Lithuania. So for that, and of course, we are targeting startups. So for that, we have several initiatives. One of them is the first of its kind incubator and accelerator in Lithuania, Clean Tech Catalyst. We launched it a month ago, and we are starting a program in 2 weeks. So I cannot tell you exact number of startups because it's quite confidential information at the moment. So, but we will be able to share the results, I believe, in 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay, can you talk about results at what about your Sunrise Tech Park? What's going on there? Can you talk about one company, startup, somebody who's making something?
Yeah. So at Tech Park, we have several companies working in clean tech, but it's not dedicated entirely for clean tech because we are quite horizontal. We have 2 shareholders, 2 major universities of Lithuania, so they are kind of dedicating our sectors. And speaking about clean tech cluster, the majority of companies are working in renewable energy sector. So for instance, one of the companies, well, actually it's a corporate major energy supplier in Baltic countries, and they're also working in Poland, Ignitis Group. So for instance, they are dedicated, they have dedicated infrastructure for experiments, for startups, for R&D companies. As an example, it's 1 megawatt battery. And companies from all across Baltics are coming and organizing their experiments. They pilot some projects. Also, another company that is really worth mentioning, and it is nice collaboration between cluster members. So one member is Klaipėda University, and they have a spin-off, which is also a member of the cluster, is in a Biostar, and they are working in maritime sector. So they are creating products to clean water from oils, so oil absorbent products. Another one, Solitech, is working all across the Europe, from Finland, I believe, to the south of Italy, and they are developing products in the solar energy sector. And recently they introduced a smart home battery for homes, and that enables a smart way to control home energy flow.
That's great. Excellent. Okay, let's move on then to Massimo. And can you talk about challenges, bottlenecks, and how you got through them? I saw that you're a member of the permitting and funding working groups of the Italian Hydrogen Association.
Yeah.
That involves overcoming a lot of bottlenecks, right?
Yeah, it's a very hard job. So knowing that hydrogen is a very, very new, let's say new sector, even if we are working on hydrogen since 2002 with our laboratories and some very small nucleus of pioneering companies in Torino. The major barrier we are facing now in terms of permitting is how to translate the current regulation, environmental regulation, fuel regulation, etc., that have been developed for traditional products such as fuel, fossil fuels, etc., into hydrogen. When we talk about hydrogen is not just another version of natural gas. It's a totally different fuel, and so it needs to be regulated in a different way, both by market and safety point of view. In this sense, in our experience, a good job that the Harbor Cluster is doing currently with our regional government is to create, first of all, to draft an hydrogen strategy for the region Piemonte, and then once this strategy has been designed, to create a governance group of such a strategy. We meet every month with our regional government. The regional government is represented inside this board with all the direction concerned by, meaning the industry direction, general direction, environmental, energy, and transport. So we can put on the table every month with our regional government all the problem we are encountering in the project that the company of the cluster are putting on the ground.
And
so
quite often, what is that? Is that permitting? Is it what?
Oh, it's whatever. Just to give you an example, hydrogen is regulated in Europe by an act that is called a renewable fuel of non-biological origin. So by European point of view, this gas is a fuel, but not always hydrogen is considered as a fuel. I can use it as an industrial feedstock, for example, in ICT sector. So if I want to produce hydrogen in my factory, just to be used as a carrier in ICT component production, according to the regulation, I'm producing fuel. If I'm producing fuel inside my factory, I must comply with the fuel regulation as well as an oil refinery. So can you imagine this barrier? This barrier has been put on the table of the regional government, say, okay, please don't consider the hydrogen production as a fuel production. Every time this fuel is not, this molecule is not used as a fuel. And every day we encounter such this, there seems to be a very small problem, but in fact they can block definitely the investment decision of such companies.
Right. So you're kind of you're troubleshooting there on a regular basis for those companies. Okay, great. Let's move to Kasia. Kasia, what's been said already? What can you add to the mix? And maybe, or is there maybe, having spent time at the commission and then with clusters, maybe you have an idea of how to overcome what challenges and bottlenecks there are.
That would be absolutely lovely if we had golden bullets, but I think, as was said before, it's about one thing is developing technologies, but then how do we implement them and how do we implement them at scale? And this is what Climate Kick is doing. And of course today, because of Daniel's really good presentation of NZIA, as we call it, in a cute way, we're more concentrating on the clean tech, which is looking at the energy transition. But of course, clean tech is also about other clean technologies where in all the sectors we have to change. And like my favorite example of a sector that we overlook because it looks nice and fluffy is, for instance, textile and fashion industry, which actually is 10% of the emissions, and also the agriculture, which is also 10% of the emissions. So on the one hand, it is about clean tech, and it is about strategic independence. But we should not forget also other technologies, maybe existing technologies that we can actually combine in order to lower emissions, where it doesn't have to be rocket science in terms of new technology, but it's about rocket science of the new business models and so on. And this is what Climate Kick is doing as well. And I think where Climate Kick is very relevant here is on the one hand with the startups that we have, but also the ecosystem that we can provide for them, because we work with cities, we work with something called deep demonstrators, where we try to work with with national and local and regional administrations to like turn all the plans that we have, the national energy and climate plans, into actual strategies. One more thing I would like to tell you here is from my Klima time, is the Innovation Fund. Innovation Fund is very interesting also because it is actually financed from the emissions trading system. So the cost that we put on carbon, we now put back into actually developing the industry. And what's important is that as we speak, there's a call open under Innovation Fund. I will put the link later. So this is something that might be interesting for the people here. And then just also overall, I'm a big fan of regulatory sandboxes, and this is what has been mentioned, because when I was working with startups before, it's always the same. We have the technology, but indeed there are incumbents in every industry. And to a certain extent, it's not in their direct immediate interest to change. But with regulatory sandboxes, we can actually pin down who in the system, who in the value chain needs to do what, so that, like the city cannot say, this is actually not my problem and it's industry that has to solve it, but industry is not always able to solve everything. But if we put them around the table in the regulatory sandbox kind of way, we can do it. And in Climate Kick, we have this knowledge how to systemically look at things. So I just wanted to maybe initially point
out. Now, can you tell us about one startup that you work with? What are they making? What are they doing? And how are you helping them?
There is the whole, it's called Klima Accelerator, and there's a whole array of that. I don't think on the one hand it would be fair to pin down one, but it really depends like where you are, which region you're in, and what do you need. But do contact me afterwards if, have a look at the Klima Accelerator, at the startups we have, and then we can see what really fits. I think that's more efficient.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. I got a question here coming in, and please send in your questions in the Q&A button down at the bottom of the screen. And the question is there a cap for member state to choose a maximum of net zero valleys inside its country to be labeled? I guess, Daniel, that's probably your thing, right?
No, there is no cap. So thanks for the question. There's no cap. And if you're interested in the concept, please get in touch. It's a very new concept. And we have already, there's some regions that have expressed interest. There is also industrial parks that have expressed interest. The only thing I would say is that in the Act itself, it talks about a geographic space. And I mention this because I know that some clusters are not based on a geographic space, but just get in touch and we can see what we can do there for you.
Okay, very good. Let's go back to Janusz then. And how does this matchmaking work? Can you tell us that?
Yeah, matchmaking. We try to connect our members in different projects, especially projects that work with innovative ideas. So if a member company comes to us and says, we have an innovative idea, but we cannot do it ourselves without any help, then we try to find out in our cleantech cluster if we can help this company or organization.
Okay, can you tell us a concrete example of that? You don't have to name names, but...
Yeah, we are imagine construction industry. So a lot of the projects are about some new methods of constructing wooden buildings, for instance, are very, very popular right now in Poland. There are not that many wooden buildings yet, as in other countries, but the industry is growing very fast. So we have member companies that come with us and say, we would like to start production of wooden buildings. And we contact our member universities and some other companies that would help this company. And the most important thing is to create an application for funds from the government. There is a lot of money for startups, for innovative projects in Poland, and you need to create this application. It's very important. So we help our member companies in cooperation with the universities and other members to create these applications and later run the projects when they get the money for the project. So we had several applications in our cluster, exactly 7 applications in the first round in the end of the last year.
Okay, great. I see a comment there from in the chat from Daniel. More information on coherence between initiatives. I have a look at that one. Let me move to Laima, and Laima, can you? What do you think about this net zero acceleration valley? Do you think that's something that could be developed where you are?
Oh yes, I think we are a perfect candidate, and definitely I will contact Daniel later after our event, because our tech park, together with the cluster, we allocated in Sunrise Valley campus, which is integrated business science and study center. So in terms of numbers of scientists and students and business companies, we are the largest campus in both the countries. And we have many projects related to net zero. We are also participating in mission-driven projects dedicated to net zero, to decarbonization. And apart from that, we also are member of Cleantech for Baltics, which is the Pan-Baltic initiative under the umbrella of Cleantech for Europe, which is already pan-European initiative with the aim to reach net zero, to work with politics, with investors, with banks, and you name it. Yeah, so yeah, I think we have not only competences and we are in the geographical area, and yeah, it will be very interesting to know more from Daniel.
That's great, and it's great that you work in different sectors, maritime, energy, and so forth.
Yeah, well, our market is quite tiny, because what Janusz was talking about, the matchmaking, we are a smaller market. So when we speak about matchmaking, we are looking internationally, because in Lithuania, everyone knows everyone, and it is not a big problem to reach out to university for some company. So it's very, all the relations are very close. So when companies come to us asking for some project partners, we look to Poland, to Finland, to Latvia or Germany.
Yeah, these clusters are important to be not just national, but they're multinational and across Europe. So that's very important to extend the tentacles when it comes to that. Yeah. Massimo, can you? Let's see. You've been for 20 years. You've been in project management, so you must be really kind of an old hand at this on figuring things out, business and market intelligence, financial analysis. Can you give us one example of what you've done with, say, one company to help speed things up for them for clean tech?
Yes, thank you. I've tried to be short, not to bore you about my entire career.
Yeah.
But,
no, we're just showing you got the experience there. So, how do you use that gravitas to make it happen, to speed things up for one company now?
Well, just to give you an example, not about myself, but my company, how my company is working, our cluster is working with innovation in clean tech. This is an anecdote that is coming from 2 years ago. There were a company, another refinery based in northwestern Italy, that come to Environment Park and said, "Oh, I don't believe in hydrogen." Oh, okay, why? No, hydrogen is not the future. Renewable hydrogen is a mess. Okay, we started to work with them, showing them, in particular, we started with them in working at the higher level, at the high management level, showing them, for instance, they never heard about the Fit to 55 policy package.
All right, there's a typical example, awareness.
This is the point. I show them the list of the regulation and directives that will have to be affected by the Fit to 55, and the boss say, "Oh, okay, that's interesting." So we started with them in working. Okay, what we can do in order to comply with this package in the coming future. And we designed it with the support of Polytechnic of Torino, other university, the Italian Association of Hydrogen, etc., the Industrial Association, a kind of pathway. So just at the end of the story, just to be short, not for you so much. Today, this company is going to deploy more than 30 megawatt of electrolyzer in northern Italy. So the point is information, but also to have skilled person, not only myself, I'm following more the European and policy affairs and permitting, but together with the university, together with all the skilled people and intelligent people that by technical point of view can show the way to such a company. So I took profit, of course, of the competences of Polytechnic of Turin in the development of renewable fuels, RF and BO, and biofuels too. We have inside Environment Park a laboratory working since 15 years on green chemistry, meaning how to reconvert to use the organic wastes and convert them into fuels. So all these pieces of the puzzle can help the companies. But remember, the first approach of this company was, okay, no, hydrogen is no future. Okay, just sit down and listen. Okay.
You won the hearts and minds there. That's great. Let's see. I think a final word then from Kasia, unless anybody else has something to say, we can wrap this up. Kasia, I mean, part of this exercise or these cluster talks are to get feedback from out there among the clusters, and you having worked at the Commission and with the cluster now, is there any kind of suggestion on how things could be done differently regarding clean tech?
That's a great question. And, I'm still exploring. I've only been on my sabbatical for 3 months. It's been a ride. So I have two things. First, I just wanted to come back to your question about the startup, because it's not fair. Actually, I did not mention our unicorn, because I know everybody loves it.
Yes, let's hear about a unicorn. Yeah.
Again, fluffy and pink. And I kind of forget about it sometimes, because it's about the direct CO2 capture. And as a old bureaucrat, I'm a bit skeptical about, betting everything on CO2 capture. We really have to also reduce. But we have a unicorn from Climate Kick, and it's called Climeworks. I will put a link.
Climeworks, yeah, throw in put something in the chat. So
it's actually really developing. But so back to regulation, because this is the kind of message that I go around with. And, first, when you appear as a DG Klima official or farmer official, it's like, stop regulating. But, like you all have said, that on the one hand, okay, it's annoying, I understand, but the science is clear. Like, there's only so much time we have, and we cannot negotiate that. And also then what I get when people get a bit less, upset about it, because I explain why things happen. We did try to regulate and it's on the coherence of the regulations. The European Green Deal is a set of systemic changes that need to happen. They need to be coherent, because in the system of CO2 reductions and environmental damage. If you twist one thing here, maybe you're destroying two other things somewhere else. You know, like, do you use plastic or do you use glass for your beverages? There are pros and cons on everything, but it really depends. So because it really all depends, it has to be done in a systemic way. And of course, like any administration, the Commission sometimes is not great at being super coherent, but the Green Deal is that. And this regulation is actually a compass, a clear compass, in order for us to indeed get the competitive advantage over the Chinas of this world. And also it happened when, Russia invaded Ukraine, and it turned out we have to be independent.
More urgency,
so treat this regulation not as a horrible thing you have to do, but something that can help you actually look at your processes. The CSRD directive coming helps you look at your processes. It's not just about reporting, it's about how can I be more sustainable in the way I operate. You can actually really save money on that. Okay, there is investment, but it's a cost that is an investment and not just a pure cost. So
so you're happy with that. That's great. And that was an impassioned call to action. I think that is great.
Use regulation.
To end with. Thank you so much to all the speakers. A lot of good input, and you can look back for all of you watching. You can look back at the chat and the slides and everything if there's anything you missed or want to see more detail on. So that was really great. Thanks to all the speakers, and let us then move on to the funding opportunities with Nina once again at ECCP.
Many thanks, Chris, and many thanks to all the panelists for sharing your activities and views. Great to hear about them and to have these examples. I'll just like to share some final funding opportunities that might be interesting for you to check out. And we have, as the first one, the Energy Efficiency Action Call provided by the Enterprise Europe Network. And this targets SMEs that need support for the design and implementation of energy efficiency related activities. It can benefit from up to 10,000 euro grants in addition to an advisory services. Big target, at least 1,800 SMEs should be supported in development of the action plans to improve energy efficiency. And the call is open for all the SMEs that are working with specialized sustainability advisors at the EEN. Deadline for this is the 15th of April. And if you click on the link in the chat, you have more information on this particular call. The Innovation Fund was mentioned by Katarzyna, and I also have this in the slides here. So there's a call open on general decarbonization with 5 different strands on small, medium scale or large scale projects, pilots and manufacturing. And the objectives of this call is to support projects demonstrating highly innovative technologies and processes and offer financial support targeted to market needs and risk profiles. For example, here in the large and medium and small scale projects, activities are supported to create innovation in low carbon technologies and processes, including environmentally safe carbon capture and utilization, as well as activities helping the construction and operation of innovative renewable energy and energy storage technologies. The deadline is the 9th of April. It's lump sum and published on the funding and tenders board. Another call open is the Emerging Energy Technologies for a New Climate Neutral Europe. Here projects should support in the demonstration of knowledge and scientific proofs of the technological feasibility of concepts of high risk, high return technologies, as well as assess the environmental, social, and economic benefits to contribute to R&I strategy, as well as contribute to establishing a long-term dependable innovation in Europe. The deadline is the 18th of April. It's a Horizon Research and Innovation Action with the topic ID here in the screen and the link in the chat. Another call, very interesting, also making the link to digital, is energy data space. Here projects should contribute to technical infrastructure for common European energy data space, help with the building of sustainable business models, the governance system, as well as reporting and training and guidance documents to involve stakeholders in sharing data. You find all the details on this call here when you click on the link in the chat. And the deadline for this call is the 29th of May. It's a digital simple grant with the topic ID in the screen and published on the funding and tenders portal. And last but not least, of course, the reminder of the calls from the Euro clusters. So there are many opportunities for SMEs offered by the Euro clusters to get financial support, to have innovation, adoption of processes and technologies, go international, or to train. And you have all the different open calls that are directly targeting SMEs on the European Cluster Collaboration Platform. When you go onto clustercollaboration.eu/open-calls, where you see the opportunities. I believe there are also several related to energy. We talked about different sectors today, also mobility, construction, where you can have a look at to give support to your SMEs. That's it from my side, and many thanks again to everybody for this talk.
Indeed, yeah, Nina, thank you. Thanks to everybody. That's it for the cluster talks this time. Be sure to register for the next ones coming up. You can see on your screen. Register for the Cluster Collaboration Platform, of course. You can continue the discussion online on the LinkedIn discussion group. You can see on that slide. Anything you heard today you want to cast wider, please do. Send out hashtag EU Clusters Talks. This has been recorded for playback. Slides available on the Cluster Collaboration Platform. I'm Chris Burns. Thanks so much for being with us. See you next time.